The year was 1904. Photography was still a luxury, a rare moment captured forever on delicate glass plates and paper prints. Families would save for months just to sit before a studio camera, their best clothes pressed, their faces carefully composed. In one such studio on a quiet street lined with gas lamps and cobblestones, a family posed for what seemed like an ordinary portrait. At first glance, the image was almost charming. Parents standing proudly, their daughter seated in front, hands neatly folded as was the fashion of the time. The sepia tones gave it a timeless beauty, the kind you might expect to find tucked away in an attic trunk, forgotten for decades until rediscovered. But beneath the polished appearance, something about this particular photo was different. People who later examined it could never shake the feeling that the girl in the picture was hiding something. Her expression, while faintly smiling, seemed strained, as though holding back a secret she could not speak. It wasn't her face, though, that drew the first wave of unease. No, the true horror, the detail that has baffled and disturbed generations since, was in her hands. Hands that at first looked perfectly ordinary until you looked closer. What those hands revealed would turn a simple studio portrait into one of the most unsettling mysteries of the early 20th century. At first glance, the girl's hands appeared folded politely in her lap, exactly as a well-mannered child in 1904 would have been instructed to sit for a photograph. But when observers leaned in closer, the illusion shattered. Her fingers were far too long, unnaturally so. They bent at angles that didn't align with the rest of her body, almost claw-like, as though they belonged to someone, or something else entirely. Even stranger, there weren't just two hands. Hidden in the sepia shadows just beneath the folds of her dress appeared the faint outline of a third. It wasn't clear, not at first, but the longer one stared, the harder it became to deny. The texture was off, the shape grotesque, as if another limb had been captured in the moment, reaching out, desperate to make itself known. Whispers spread when the photograph resurfaced decades later. Some said it was simply a trick of exposure, a double image from a restless child shifting in the chair. Others, however, weren't so sure. The proportions didn't match, the angles didn't line up. These weren't the hands of a young girl at all. And the most chilling detail, no one at the studio remembered anyone else being in the room with her. The studio where the photo was taken was not just any small-town shop. It stood on the edge of a Georgia street, a place that had already collected its own share of ghost stories. Built only a decade earlier, the photographer's parlor had once been part of an old boarding house, a building where sickness had swept through and left entire rooms abandoned. By 1904, no one spoke openly of the death that lingered there, but locals whispered of footsteps after closing, and of strange shadows caught in the glass of the developing trays. When the girl sat for her portrait, no one thought of these tales. Her mother only wanted a keepsake, a moment frozen in time. But when the image emerged from the chemical bath, the photographer reportedly froze. The girl's delicate face was framed perfectly, her posture prim and proper, but the hands, those impossible hands, had appeared where none should be. Some claimed the photographer quietly asked the family if another child had been standing nearby, trying to steady her. The mother shook her head. There had been no one else. Over time, the story faded, tucked away in the dust of forgotten albums. But the studio's reputation remained. People said the camera had captured something that day, not of the living, but of what still lingered within the walls. Something that chose the moment of a child's innocent photograph to reveal itself. For years, the photograph sat quietly in the family's possession, tucked inside a wooden chest lined with lace. To visitors, it was nothing more than a cherished memento, a frozen smile from 1904. But among those who studied it closely, one detail kept resurfacing. The hands didn't just look wrong, they looked older. The fingers were gnarled, the skin unnaturally textured, as though weathered by decades of labor. These weren't the smooth, youthful hands of a little girl. They resembled the hands of someone far beyond her age, someone who could not have been sitting in that chair. And then came the most disturbing observation, the position of the hands. While the girl rested calmly in her lap, the third seemed to be gripping her wrist, as though holding her down. Whispers spread through the family tree. Some said it was the spirit of a grandmother, one who had died in that very boarding house before the studio was converted. Others were less charitable. They spoke of a darker history, of a relative whose violent temper had left scars nobody dared discuss openly. But that was only the beginning. Because when researchers revisited the studio's records, they found something that deepened the unease. On the same day the girl's portrait was taken, another appointment had been scheduled. Yet no image from that session was ever developed. The names were smudged in the ledger, half erased, as if someone wanted them forgotten. Decades later, when collectors and historians began to sift through the scattered archives of early 20th century studios, the girl's photograph resurfaced. It drew immediate attention, not just for its eerie visual detail, but for what was missing. The ledger from that week in 1904 clearly showed 2 bookings, the girl and her mother at noon, and another family scheduled just after, but no trace of that second photograph has ever been found. Curious, researchers began digging deeper into census records and local newspapers. What they uncovered was unsettling. The names linked to that vanished appointment belonged to a family that had mysteriously left the town within the same year. No explanation was given in the public record, no obituary, no sale notice, not even a passing mention in church logs. It was as if they had simply ceased to exist. Even more troubling, the handwriting in the ledger shifted at their entry, as though written by a different hand, uneven, shaky, as if the person writing had been under duress. The studio owner's descendants later admitted that he had grown secretive in his final years, refusing to speak of certain clients and quietly burning a collection of negatives before his death. Could the missing session and the strange hands in the girl's photograph be connected? Or was it simply coincidence buried in the dust of history? To those who examined the evidence, one thing was clear. The girl's portrait was not just a haunting image. It was a clue, a starting point to a story the town had tried to erase. When investigators traced the family from the missing appointment, they stumbled upon fragments of a story that had survived only in whispers. Town elders recalled a household plagued by restless spirits, though the exact meaning was left vague, as if saying too much might invite the curse itself. A neighbor remembered that the children would cry through the night, claiming they saw figures standing at their bedside, touching their arms, holding them down. The most unsettling detail came from a single church record. The family had requested a blessing on their home just weeks before the photo session. The priest who performed it described the air inside as heavy, impossible to breathe, and noted that the walls seemed to echo with sounds no one could place. Not long after, the family disappeared from every official record, as though erased. What made the connection undeniable was this: the girl's photograph was taken on the very day the blessing was performed. Some believed the family had brought their unseen torment with them to the studio and that it had not left quietly. Instead, it had slipped into the moment of exposure, imprinting itself forever on the glass plate that captured the girl's portrait. The hands, many argued, did not belong to her at all. They belonged to them. As the photograph circulated among collectors and historians, an unsettling pattern emerged. Those who owned the image, or even displayed it for too long, reported strange occurrences. Clocks would stop at midnight. Mirrors would reflect shadows that weren't there, and some claimed they felt cold hands brushing against their own. One distant relative who inherited the photo described waking to the faint sound of a child's whisper, repeating a single, urgent plea she could never understand. Researchers began noticing something even more disturbing in the image itself. The girl's hands seemed to shift subtly depending on the angle from which the photograph was viewed. At times they appeared to curl tightly, almost grasping. At others they were limp, dangling as if lifeless. Could it be a flaw in early photography? Some experts claimed so, but those familiar with spirit photography of the era were far less skeptical. They suggested that the hands were not mere trickery. They were evidence of something supernatural, a presence imprinted on film by sheer force of will. Even the town that once housed the studio bore the mark of unease. Locals spoke of doors opening by themselves in abandoned buildings, of children refusing to walk down certain streets, and of dreams haunted by faces with impossibly long fingers. The legend of the girl's photograph had grown into a quiet terror, stretching far beyond the frame, touching all who dared to look too closely. And yet, despite the fear, curiosity persisted. The hands in the photo had become more than a detail. They were a warning, a lingering question about what had been captured that day in 1904. A secret that refused to stay buried, no matter how much time passed. Decades have passed since the photograph was first taken, yet the girl's hands continue to haunt those who encounter the image. In modern times, the photo has resurfaced on online forums dedicated to the unexplained, shared across dark history blogs and social media threads. Each new viewing seems to draw the same reaction: unease, fascination, and sometimes outright fear. People claim that no matter how closely they inspect it, the hands appear to move, as if resisting the constraints of the original frame. Historians who study early photography see it as a chilling example of the era's obsession with capturing life and death in ways that often blurred reality. Some theorize the image could have been manipulated using double exposures, a technique popular among spirit photographers of the early 1900s. Yet others insist that the unnatural quality of the hands, the shadows surrounding them, and the vanished family records hint at something far darker than a photographic trick. Collectors who have possessed the photograph report strange occurrences: doors closing on their own, sudden cold drafts in warm rooms, and unsettling dreams of unseen figures. Many have vowed never to display it, fearing the repercussions of keeping such an image in their homes. And even those who study it from afar describe a creeping, unshakable feeling, an intuition that the hands in the photo were never meant to be seen. The story of the 1904 studio portrait has become a cautionary tale. It reminds us that photographs, no matter how innocent they appear, may capture more than just the surface. They can hold secrets, fears, and the echoes of events that reality itself has tried to erase. And in the case of the girl's hands, the past refuses to remain silent. Looking back on this 1904 photograph, it is easy to see only an innocent studio portrait, a young girl, dressed neatly, posing politely for the camera. But photographs do more than record appearances. They capture moments, emotions, and sometimes fragments of reality that defy explanation. In this case, the girl's hands speak louder than her smile ever could, revealing a truth that has lingered for over a century. What makes the story haunting is not just the oddity of the hands, but what they represent: the unseen, the overlooked, the shadows that history leaves behind, the vanished family, the unexplained ledger entries, and the chilling reports surrounding the studio all hint at a past that refused to remain hidden. And while we can debate the technical explanations, double exposures, trick photography, those who encounter the image cannot escape the visceral unease it evokes. The moral is subtle, yet profound. It reminds us that what we see is never the full story, that appearances can deceive, and that even the smallest detail, a pair of hands, can carry the weight of secrets too dark for words. The girl in the photo becomes more than a subject. She is a silent witness, a portal to a mystery that challenges our understanding of reality. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this: to truly confront history, to truly see the past, we must learn to notice what others have overlooked. We must ask uncomfortable questions, and we must be willing to face truths that are unsettling, inexplicable, and even frightening. Because in the shadows of forgotten photographs, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently for those who dare to look closely enough. The photograph may sit quietly in an archive, a digital scan on a collector's hard drive, or a faded print in a family album. Yet its impact lingers, reaching across time to unsettle anyone who dares to stare long enough. The girl's hands, impossibly twisted and unnatural, refuse to be forgotten. They are a reminder that even the most innocent images can carry secrets the living are not meant to see. What is perhaps most chilling is the knowledge that countless other photographs from that era may contain similar anomalies, fragments of stories that history chose to ignore. Each image is a window, and sometimes behind the window, something stares back. So I leave you with this question. If you came across a photograph like this in your own family's collection, would you look away? Or would you dare to uncover the truth? Would you accept the surface? Or would you notice the hands, the shadows, the things that don't belong? Here at Truth Uncaged, we dig into stories that are too dark, too strange, or too forgotten to remain silent. If this story unsettled you, if it made you wonder what really hides behind old photographs, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your theories, even your fears. And don't forget to subscribe, because for every hidden image, every overlooked detail, there is a story waiting to be revealed. Remember, the past is watching, and sometimes it reaches out through the most ordinary things. A smile, a glance, a pair of hands frozen forever in time.